as I get to the main road, there's a car that drives past, and I'm thinking, please don't stop, please don't stop, please don't stop. I'm butt naked in the middle of the road in Ukraine somewhere. But luckily, at that moment, I looked like someone to avoid rather than help. So they sort of diverted around me and then drove off very quickly.
Hello everyone, my name is Thea Darracott. I'm the Acting Executive Retail Editor and Events Director at Condé Nast Traveller. Some of you will be familiar with our Traveller's Tales series that we have live in London, but during this lockdown period, we are extending that to recorded Zoom conversations, and I'm extremely lucky to be joined now by Sean Conway. Sean is an endurance adventurer and the first and only person in history to cycle, swim and run the length of Britain for your latest film, Europe or Bust, which is available now on Amazon. He competes for the world record in cycling unsupported across Europe. Sean, amazing achievements. So I wanted to start by asking you, this wasn't your first attempt to cycle across Europe, was it?
No, it wasn't. It goes way back. This Europe record was the third and final F, I call it. In my world, I was sort of really keen to get the 3 Fs of endurance, and that's a world's first, a world's furthest, and a world's fastest. And I got a world's first when I swam the length of Britain. I got and still hold the world's longest triathlon world record, 4,200 miles. So that's the first and the furthest. And I just had this fastest. It was the last bucket list big goal that I set myself 10 years ago now. And I knew that I always wanted it to be on the bicycle. The bicycle was my first love. I cycled around the world, and so in 2017 I had a crack at it, and I was doing really well. But on day 4, I sort of picked up a little niggle and had to pull out of that. And it was tough. It was tough having to reattempt it. You know when you write a really long email and it doesn't save,
Yes.
and you have to do it all over again. You're just like, oh man. And that's what it was like, because all the fun stuff of buying the map and looking at the route, I'd done that all before. So to go back to the start line, it was just kind of the slog of training and that. But I had to do it because I knew these records kind of get broken every single year. And if I left it another year, it would just be a harder record to break. I had to just get back on the horse,
Do you think going back to it and recognizing certain landmarks, do you think that helped you at all? Or do you prefer to get it done first time round? Do you think there's a benefit to going back and doing it again?
Oh, 100%. If you had all the time and the money in the world, you would actually recce the whole route. You would cycle the route as a training ride and then come back and cycle it again. But that's just impractical. I'm a new father. I've got a young child and all that. So I couldn't do that to my wife. But certainly, because I did it nearly 1,000 miles in the first attempt. So the first 1,000 miles of the 4,000 miles I knew, which actually really helped in my favor, because I knew, especially, I'm self-supported. So finding food, finding good places to sleep, some of the urban places, you're going 20, 30 miles through the outskirts of Madrid or Munich, for example, you can't camp. So I kind of knew everything up to the Pyrenees, but then after the Pyrenees, it was kind of back to no man's land.
And that was something that really struck me as well, watching you go through the Pyrenees and then feeling, this incredible sense of achievement. But that was by no means the hardest part by the looks of it.
No, I chose to go the wrong way. I saved the worst bit for the end, and some people say you should get the worst bit out the way at the beginning. So I went from Portugal across to the Ural Mountains in Russia, and that Eastern European leg is just terribly difficult to do proper big miles. And when I call it big miles, I was needing to do a minimum of about 165 miles a day, but I was looking to try and do about 180 to give myself a buffer. And then by the time I hit Russia, not only did I have these headwinds, and if anyone's into cycling, I had 1,000 miles of headwinds. So for 1,000 miles straight, I had a 15-mile-an-hour headwind bang on my nose. Oh, it was soul destroying. I remember looking at my computer. Eventually, I just covered my computer up, my cycle computer, because it was saying I was doing 7 miles an hour, which a good runner can run, So In fact, not even a good runner. Like Kipchoge did 13 miles an hour for a marathon. So, it was tough. The last bits, the road conditions are bad. The headwinds, the food is just not very particularly nutritious in service stations, because basically I'm just living out of service stations.
I did notice that. I thought, I mean, the endurance that you're putting your body through, and the challenges that you're going through, and the food you're eating. By contrast, there seems to be a lot of peanut butter.
Yeah, well, actually, peanut butter is pretty good. So I look for a third carb, third fat, third protein, and peanut butter kind of is that. And actually, in a little tub like this, it's 2,000 calories, so it's pretty good. But you also need to remember to have sort of fruit and vegetables just to keep healthy. But then I'm on a sort of strict time schedule, because the record is usually won or lost on about 15, 20 minutes a day. That is traffic lights in an urban area. That's stopping and waiting in a slightly longer queue for food. It's so I'm stealing minutes. I'm trying to sleep as close to the road as possible. So I'm sleeping in drain pipes under the road, because that's pretty much as close to the road as you can get, just to steal a few minutes every single day.
And tell me about the unsupported element of it. How important was it to you that it should be unsupported? Because so many explorers, that seems to be a big focus. There seems to be a lot of pressure on them doing something that's unsupported.
So for me, especially on a bicycle, I'd watched some other people. There's a few celebrities back in the day would go off and do these big cycle challenges and these running challenges. And I thought, well, it was really impressive. I considered them sort of outside my world, because they had this big support crew, and I presume they just had loads of funding and money and scientists and doctors. So although I was impressed with their achievement, I kind of didn't relate to it at all, because I thought, well, actually, of course they can do it. They've got this whole team with them. So I wanted to do it in a way that anyone could, really. And even on the thing, when I did the world's longest triathlon, I even used a bamboo bike for that, just to prove that you can break something. It's not all about having the best kit in the world. I had a bike that was once a tree, and I still managed to survive. And it's a super important message, because a lot of people, the number of emails I get saying, oh, I'd love to do this, but I don't have the right trainers, or oh, I don't have a good enough bicycle, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, come on. You're missing the point. You don't need all that sort of fancy kit. So that was it. And also, it's just a lot easier to sort of manage something when you don't have other people around. You can be spontaneous. If it starts to rain at 11 at night and there's a good drain pipe, I can just pull off the road and just sleep there. I don't have to sort of mess around with sort of crews and vans and all these sort of things. So it's a bit of a mixture, really.
And you were comparing yourself on a day-by-day basis to the previous holder of the world record. Yeah. How important was that to you psychologically?
So at the beginning, I thought, so Jonas Deichmann, a German chap, he had the previous record. And I managed to get his tracking data. So when you submit your world record, you have to give all your tracking data. So I got his tracking data and put it on my website, thinking it would just be a little fun thing, so basically there was a ghost figure of him, and then the real figure of me. And when he stopped to sleep, his little ghost figure would stop. This was from 2 years previously, but all the data was live. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. My friends and family can see a head-to-head race on the website. But however, it just soon was just really playing on my mind, because I would do a monster day. I think I did 220 miles in the first 24 hours. I had a short sleep, sort of 3 or 4 hours, woke up and he was 80 miles ahead of me, and I was pulling my hair out going, am I ever going to sort of keep up with this pace? The only thing I sort of got me through it is I knew his final time. So I just presumed he just really tanked at the end and really sort of bonked and couldn't keep the mileage, which is exactly what happened. He also had a terrible time in Russia.
Have you ever met him or spoken to him since?
Jonas, yeah, we chat all the time, because how's this for cool? He's now trying to, I broke his Europe record. He's now trying to break my triathlon, world's longest triathlon record. Yeah. So I was getting advice for him for the Europe one, and now he's getting advice from me for the world's longest triathlon. So yeah, and he's going to milk it. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, look out for him. He's going to do a good job of it.
And then how do you cope with the sleep deprivation? Only averaging such a small amount of sleep every night, and then still getting up and having the energy to continue with, as you said, not always the best diet. How do you do it?
You actually practice it. You practice it, and you read up on it. So what really helped me is reading up the actual physiological things that happen to you when you lack sleep, if you miss a sleep cycle, if you have a short amount of sleep and haven't, actually depleted all your energy reserves. And there's a lot of really interesting information there about sort of hormones that trick you into feeling tired when actually your body can still perform as long as you're eating enough. And weirdly, just knowing all that information just helped me deal with those feelings. Because when you're cycling along, all you're really dealing with is strange emotions and feelings, because your eyes will be droopy and you'll feel this weird, I get a bit of a chest cough always when I'm sleep deprived, and you get this weird tightening. I feel this weird tightening in my chest as well, and this weird sort of fogginess in my head. And at the beginning, if you've not experienced it, it really stresses you out. You're like, oh my, what's happening? I just need to sleep. But you soon realize that actually these are just things that are happening to you. They're not actually reducing my performance for the most part. They'll be reducing my recovery time a lot, depending on how much I've pushed it that day. So if I can stay within a certain heart rate, it means my recovery time is drastically shorter. So again, as long as I've kind of kept on top of my heart rate in the day and not pushed it too hard on the hills, then all these things are just going on in my head. The one downside is that when you do lose a bit of cognitive ability, you can start making silly decisions. And when you're on public roads and there's other traffic, that's usually actually for me the clincher, the sort of, right, I need to sleep now because it's too dangerous.
Obviously very good at listening to your body.
Oh yeah, especially now. I'm nearing 40, and it's amazing. Even just in the last 2 or 3 years, I know everything about my body. I worked out that I'm allergic to certain types of dairy, and they were really subtle. In fact, I thought I had hay fever for 15 years. I was convinced I just had hay fever. And it turns out it was a type of milk that I was drinking, and it's little things like that. And I know now if I'm even a little bit dehydrated, if I'm sort of half a liter dehydrated in the day, I can feel the sensation in my skin even. Or if I'm lacking certain nutrients in my diet, I can feel it now. So it's really interesting, and it's because I focus on it. I focus my energy, and we've stopped doing that because everything just kind of comes to us. We can have everything all the time, so we kind of don't have to listen to our bodies that often nowadays, and just the modern world. But if you kind of focus on, why am I feeling a bit stiff? Why am I got this tingling? Things like that. Why do I have a headache? I just find it quite fascinating.
So, do you think that's something that we're generally losing touch with as a human race? That being in touch with nature, responding to what our body needs when it needs it, and also understanding when it's trying to trick you. You don't necessarily need to sleep. You can continue. Do you think that's a skill that we're losing?
Oh, 100%. We're losing loads of things. We're losing, definitely the sort of feeling your body thing. That's super interesting because I think nowadays, to survive on this planet, you don't really have to know if you're dehydrated. Going back, centuries and millennia, 1,000 years ago, if you were dehydrated, you couldn't catch the animal that you were going to get, or climb the tree to get the coconut or whatever, because you'd just be you would perform worse if you weren't, if you didn't know your body. So I think, now, and that's why sport is such a good thing in general, and sport and travel. And when you go out there and push yourself, and, even if you're just going traveling with a rucksack, you'll soon realize muscles you didn't know existed. You'll know when things are going wrong. And it takes years though. I've been doing this for 10 years, and really only in the last couple of years have I sort of noticed those real subtle changes in my mood even. And how dry my mouth is, or if I'm blinking a lot, and little things like that, which it takes forever and ever, and I still haven't got it right. I'm still kind of guessing and trying to work things out. The sleep thing though is interesting, because I think we actually probably as a society don't sleep enough, and I think there are studies that suggest there's a sort of, especially in Western culture, to have a nap is considered weak almost, whereas if you go into the East, it's quite normal for a businessman to sort of go to a park bench and have a nap. You know, you never see that in the city of London. So, you know, someone coming out of Canary Wharf and going and lying on a bench, you know, whereas, so it's kind of almost considered a weakness if you don't, if you, you know, and if you know, the whole like, oh, I did 80 hours a week, you know, I worked until midnight and was up at 5 a.m. You know, there's a certain element of that that I think needs addressing. However, on the flip side is when you want it, when you need to go and perform, and you certainly can last on a lot less sleep than you think. I mean, you look at the guys who do the race across America, they do between 7 and 9 days, the leading people. And in that whole time, I think they'll probably have 9 hours sleep in a week. It's phenomenal. I don't know how they do it. I mean, that for me is even next level stuff.
So tell me about the sleeping, because you, as you said, you didn't have a tent. You only had your mattress and a sleeping bag. And then you were finding places as close to the road as possible. Was there ever a moment where you were nervous about the place you'd chosen to sleep? Or...
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah. There was actually a couple of really sketchy moments on this Europe ride. One is I was cycling past loads of rapeseed fields, and they are like the best places to camp because the rapeseeds sort of hang over, so it stops the dew going on you. This is, of course, if it's not raining. And you've got the furrows to lay your sleeping bag in. They're amazing. Anyway, so I found this sort of dirt track, which was completely overgrown. It had sort of 4-foot high long grass. It was a road, but it had been overgrown. So I pushed my bike through it. And then I was like, no one's going to find me here. So I only went about 2 meters into the rapeseed. And then at 4 a.m, I heard a car driving up this completely overgrown track. And I'm thinking, oh, well, what's going on here? I mean, in my head is like, there's only one reason you would drive up this track, and this is to bury a body or come and murder a cyclist. You know, in my time, like that was it. I was like, I'm convinced someone's coming to dump a body, because you would never drive down this. Why would you? No one's driven down it for ages. And then he stopped sort of, well, I say, yeah, it was a he, because I kind of looked. So this gentleman stopped about 2 meters from me in the rapeseed. Now the rapeseed was just high enough for me to put my bike up. And sort of push it. And bear in mind, I'm also completely naked right now because it was so hot. I didn't want to, and I only have one set of clothing, so I just take my clothes off at night. So I'm crouching below the rapeseed, and his engine was still on as well. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening here? So anyway, I sort of grabbed everything, hung it on my bike like a clothes rack, and sort of creeped down the rapeseed, hoping he wouldn't see me, and then just sprinted down to the main road. To then go, there was another track on the other side. I thought, well, if I go across to the other side, at least I can get changed. And then, as luck would have it, at 4 a.m, as I get to the main road, there's a car that drives past, and I'm thinking, please don't stop, please don't stop, please don't stop. You know, I'm butt naked in the middle of the road in Ukraine somewhere. But luckily, at that moment, I looked like someone to avoid rather than help. So they sort of diverted around me and then drove off very quickly.
And then how did it work with the filming? Did you have a crew who were following you?
So after my first failed attempt, a friend of mine called Kev, I've known him for years, I said, I'm going to go back and do it. And he's a filmmaker. And he said, oh man, I'd love to film that. I'm like, well, there's nothing stopping you, man. If you want to follow me, it's your game. He's like, really? And I was like, yeah, sweet, why not? And so him and his mate Gav, they just had a camper van, and they just sort of kind of were following me and finding me every now and then. And they would give me a GoPro, so most of it I shot myself, but they would sort of be hiding in bushes doing the sort of the scenic shots and that sort of thing. Yeah, I would probably only saw them twice a day. I'd get up much earlier than them. You know, they had their own adventure trying to find places to park a camper van in the middle of the Ukraine, you know. And then they would sort of come and find me in the day, make sure my GoPros were all charged, and do a few drone shots that I was pretty much unaware of. And then sometimes they'd film me camping up for the night, which was actually, I found a little bit annoying because they, you know, to light it, they have to have these big lights on their cameras and everything. But I'm so near the road, I'm like, guys, I don't actually want anyone to know I'm here. Yeah, it was very much, and that was the rule I had. And it was the same rule I had with Discovery Channel. And they were very respectful. I said, I'm going to do it the way I would do it if no one was watching. So I'm not reshooting anything. I'm not cycling back up that hill and doing it again. I'm not staging anything and that sort of thing. And luckily in the world of TV land now, everyone's pretty on board with authenticity. So I was pretty happy that on both occasions with Discovery and with Kev and Gav, that they didn't sort of try and provoke some sort of reality kind of, TV land hype and drama. Like there was none of that. What you see is real, and that was super important for me. And also I didn't have the time to stop and redo it. So, which I think annoyed them, because sometimes they'd miss that shot of me going down a hill, and I was like, see ya.
There's so much incredible footage, but then you also were quite creative with your footage as well. When you took the GoPro down and you were talking to Pedro the Skull, and did you find it harder to film in the tougher moments when you were really exhausted and pushing up those mountains or hills, or did you find it hard to consciously be aware of the fact that you also needed to be filming? Was that an additional challenge?
So interestingly, in the early days, so back in the day when I sort of did the stuff with Discovery and some of the self-shot stuff I did at the beginning, when times were going tough, that's the last thing I wanted to do is actually film it. And without a doubt, every time I came back, I would regret not having that footage, and especially now that I'm a father, I want my son to see what it was actually like. And I'm an ingrained storyteller. And also in my old life, I used to be a photographer. So before this world, I used to be a photographer. So yeah, I've got this creative side of me, and I love telling stories. And I have all my grandparents, all four of them died before I was really old enough to know much about their lives. And they didn't write diaries. They didn't have any photo albums or anything. So it's now, it's now become a thing where I want to document everything, just to show my son one day that he had a lunatic dad, and also it kind of, again, it scratches that creative itch in me, because I feel that I really enjoy visual storytelling in the form of documentaries, and because I've missed some of those shots in the past because I was too miserable and too grumpy, now I almost feel like I'm doing myself an injustice by not doing it. So but yeah, it is tough, especially when it's cold and raining, and you've got your gloves on, and you've got to take your glove off to press the button on and that sort of thing. And sometimes some of those I missed, when I had a puncture and the trucks were screaming past my ears. I'm like, now's probably not a good time to film. but yeah, for most time I try my best just to show my son in the future what it was like.
And then I also wanted to say, I mean, there's such a focus on sustainability with every challenge you do, the self-supported element, the fact that the first time you did something like this, to my knowledge anyway, was on the bamboo bicycle.
Yeah.
And also on the journey rather than the destination. It feels like, it's a challenge that you've imposed upon yourself. And I was wondering if you think there's something we can learn from that as travellers ourselves, if there should be more importance placed on sustainability and the journey rather than where you're going to.
It's a difficult, I battle with this in my head constantly, because fundamentally I think travel is a super important, if not one of the most important life skills and lessons you can learn. When you travel, you become more appreciative of other people's way of thinking. I think if everyone traveled, there'll be no wars, because you kind of get to know, oh wow, that's the way they do it out in Jordan, and oh, that's the way they do it in America, and you kind of learn about it. And if everyone did that, I think we'd all kind of appreciate each other a little bit more and go, oh well, you're just different, like it doesn't make you bad. And so fundamentally I think travel is important. However, all travel has some sort of cost implication to the world. No, I lie. Cycling is amazing. You can be super efficient when you cycle. You can travel great distances, and walking as well. But for the most part, you got to fly to get somewhere often, and sometimes if you're really traveling on a shoestring, you're not really contributing to that country's welfare either. And sometimes that can be an issue. And that's why I've never done the sort of the real cheap financial thing, because I think it's unfair for a sort of a white middle class European to go off to India and try and live on 50p a day, because it's totally achievable, but you have more than that, so why not give back to that country? So I've never sort of subscribed to that sort of type of traveling. However, if that works for you, if that's something that interests you, it's also important because also I think you can travel a lot on not a lot of money. Alistair Humphreys, who cycled around the world for 4 years back, and he started in 2001. He did 4.5 years around the world on 7.5 grand. So he was surviving on 1,500 quid a year, cycling around the whole world. I mean, that's just phenomenal, right? So you can do a lot more, a lot less. But yeah, it is a difficult one. You know, I've done a lot of my traveling in Britain, you know, so swimming, cycling, running the length of Britain, doing the triathlon around Britain. I've got the length of Britain sailing record too. So I have purposefully tried to do as much as possible on the best island in the world, you know, Great Britain, and that's why I love it. But I still think going to far-flung corners of the earth is super important, just to learn about other people's culture and bring it back here and inform people that, you know, everyone actually, you know, 99.999% people are just in the middle bit. Everyone else just wants to get along and have a bit of fun, and we celebrate, you know, everyone else's differences, but it's the end bits that have the voice, don't they? They shout the loudest on the peripheries, which is sad. But yeah, I think if we can be all more sustainable, yeah, it is. Of course, it's super important. But it's a bit of a balance, isn't it?
Well, the other thing that struck me about it was you were traveling through such beautiful scenery, and you're obviously on this mission to break this record. So you're constantly moving all the time. Is there any part of your journey where you thought, I really want to come back here and actually spend some time, maybe not on a bicycle?
All of it. Everywhere I go. I call it wine tasting traveling. So what, you know, because this is, in fact, it's one of the most common questions I get. It's like, oh, don't you regret just zooming past 200 miles a day through a place? And my answer is always, it's like wine tasting. You know, when you decide to go for a wine tasting session, you don't stop after the second little taste and go, oh, I'm not going to have the rest. I'm just going to finish the bottle on this one, because you're inquisitive. You want to have a little bit of each. And then at the end you go, oh, well, I can now go back, you know? And that's how I sort of see my fast touring and my records, is I'm sort of wine tasting. I'm just skimming the surface of all these countries as I go along and meeting, you know, sometimes you might only meet one person or chat to one person in a country. But that's enough for you to get a little bit of a flavor, like, oh, you know, oh, look at the clothing they were wearing. Oh, look at the language they were speaking to each other. Or look at the type of vehicles they have. I love my old classic car. So in Russia, it was like all these amazing laders and everything. And it's great. So for me, that's what I do. I sort of do all the little bits of wine tasting, and then in the back of my head, I've got all these places I want to go back to, which is getting quite long now, but they're there. You know, I'm not going anywhere for a while, so I've also got to give myself something to look forward to later in life. You know, I know that I want to go back to this amazing hot spring in the middle of the outback in Australia, and I want to take my family there one day, for example. So yeah, they're in my sort of look forward to list, which I think everyone needs to have, you know.
And talking of looking forward to things, you've got a young son now, too young to be on a bicycle just yet. But when he can ride, which I'm sure it's going to be in his genes, do you plan on maybe one day traveling with him, doing any of these challenges with him?
100%. In fact, he took his first little ride in a bike seat yesterday. So we took him out for the first time on the back of the seat. I'm not going to lie, he wasn't too excited about it, I was heartbroken about it. I think he was more confused. He was like, what's going on? There's wind in my face, so I'm going really quickly. This is not the pram. But you know what? So it's funny though, because all my friends, you know, I'm nearly 40 and I've just had my first son. So a lot of my friends, their kids are sort of 10, 11, 12, you know, and I keep telling them, I'm like, oh, you know, when my kid's your age, we're going to go and have so many cool adventures together, and I'm going to be like the cool dad. And they all tell me, mate, your son will never think you're cool. So, you know, I'm just breaking to you now, you know. So, but yeah, of course, now we're going to, as a family, my wife's super sporty as well. So we got loads of plans.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for your time. And we'll look forward to hearing about your next adventures.
Yeah, look out, watch your space. September, we're going to launch it. So it's a big one. So yeah, but yeah, thank you for having me on.
Thank you.